friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie 0784. Tighten that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters, as we proceed to give you what you need. We about to go back to the man. We about to go back to the myth. We about to go back to the legend. MrBallen. Back to MrBallen Bean Team. And the title of the video is They Ate the Forbidden Meat. Top 3 strange, but true. Now, this is just an early prediction, y'all, before we even start the video. I think the forbidden meat, long story short, short story long, is human meat. That's just my early prediction, y'all. But I don't know. But we're about to see. But before we see, Bean Team, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. To get what you need, please. It is another MrBallen Sunday. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
Today, I'm going to tell 3 strange but true stories. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please steal the like button's phone and completely rearrange the location of all their apps. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Ballin'.
On the afternoon of September 27th, 1956, a 13-year-old boy named Neary Morgan was walking with his 2 younger brothers through a desert in South Australia called Maralinga. Neary and his brothers were members of an isolated Aboriginal tribe called the Martu, and they were out right now to hunt kangaroos for their family. So Neary had a spear, and his 2 younger brothers had a club, and they also had a boomerang. And for a while, they had been tracking this particular group of kangaroos. But every time they slowed down and, the brothers got ready to strike, the kangaroos would take off. And it was very frustrating. But eventually, as they were walking, this group of kangaroos stopped at a watering hole, which was just a few dozen yards away from them. And so at that point, the brothers knew this was their chance. These kangaroos were going to stay here long enough that they could strike. And so Neary signaled to his brothers that it was time to move. And so they got down in the brush and began advancing on the kangaroos. But after only taking a few steps, they heard this loud rumbling sound off in the distance. And as they looked to see what was going on, the sky suddenly was illuminated impossibly bright, to the point where Neary is shielding his eyes to just see what's going on here. And as he was doing this extremely hot gust of wind came blasting through and literally knocked the brothers onto the ground, totally disorienting them. And then from the ground, at some point, Neary kind of turns his head and he happens to look in the direction of the watering hole where the kangaroos were. And then he sees them literally floating in the air, coming right over to him and then dropping on the ground. And then a moment later,
what is going on, Bean Team? What is happening with the weather right now? I don't know. Let's go.
It was like everything just went back to normal. The sky went back to a normal color. There was no more rumbling. There was no more wind. Except now, you have all these kangaroos just dead right in front of Neary and his brothers. Now, of course, Neary and his brothers had a lot to process here. I mean, they really had no idea what had happened. But they're looking at this bounty right in front of them, all these kangaroos, and they're thinking, what's just happened here was a gift from God. Clearly, what we just experienced was literally God lifting these kangaroos up, ending their lives, and putting them at our feet. This was a gift. And so eventually, Neri and his brothers, after kind of standing up and dusting themselves off, began lifting up these kangaroos and carrying as many as they could back to their tribe. And I
can't even blame the brothers for thinking that way. You know what I'm saying? This was a gift from God. How else can we explain this ish? All we know is the kangaroo's dead, we hungry, now we got meat for our family. Let's go. But I'm thinking whatever this really was with the weather, if we being real about the situation being team, I don't know, but I think maybe these kangaroos done got some type of like radioactivity in their blood, in their body, you know what I'm saying, from this blast or whatever. I think this is the forbidden meat MrBallen was talking about. Let's find out.
That night, the tribe had this big celebration honoring this gift they had been given from God, and they had this big feast and they ate all this kangaroo meat. I mean, it was incredible. But then the next day, when the tribe woke up, everybody who had eaten any of that kangaroo was violently sick. Vomiting, rashes all over their body, aches, pain. I mean, people were really sick. And over the next few days, some people did recover, but a lot of others did not. And soon, people from this tribe began dying. And so naturally, Neri and the other members of the tribe did make the connection that very likely whatever was happening here, the sickness, was tied to consuming that kangaroo meat. And then other members of the tribe who didn't necessarily subscribe to the idea that, this had been a gift from God, just said clearly the meat was poisoned. But they didn't know if that was intentional, if somebody had done that, or if it was just kind of a byproduct of something else. But poison, that's what was doing this. But for Neri and his tribe, this whole event remained a mystery until 1967, so 11 years later, when Neri was 24 years old. That's when representatives of the British government came out to southern Australia, near where the Martu tribe lived, and began trying to clean up the mess that they had made. It would turn out all those dead kangaroos that got kind of dumped out of the sky right in front of Neri and his brothers were not the result of, God giving them a gift. Instead, the reason that happened was because of a big scientific experiment that was conducted in Maralinga in total secrecy. The British government was testing nuclear bombs. Neri and his brothers had been a few kilometers away from a detonation site, and where they were positioned was basically exactly in the right spot to where they would feel the effects of the explosion, they would hear it, they would see this huge lighting up of the sky, they would feel the shockwave, but they were just far enough away from the detonation site that the shockwave and the blast and all that did not kill them. It knocked them to the ground and made them totally disoriented and confused, and I'm sure it hurt a great deal, but it didn't kill them. However, those kangaroos they had been stalking were technically closer to the detonation site. They were also smaller and so were more susceptible to an explosion being affected by it. And so they were just close enough that when that shockwave passed through, it lifted up and obliterated the kangaroos and threw them right in front of Neri. They were like right at that perfect separation point. Neri and brothers just barely safe, kangaroos just barely in the lethal zone. And so keep in mind that Neri and his brothers did not know things like nuclear bombs existed. They're very isolated. They're completely cut off from sort of modern society. And so even though they saw a lot of indications that this was a bomb, they didn't really interpret it that way. Instead, they interpreted this as, oh, God has bestowed upon me this bounty. Like this is a gift from God. But in reality, it was just this explosion, and the meat, the kangaroo meat, was not only devastated from the blast, but it was also littered with radiation from the blast. And so the members of the tribe who ate the kangaroo meat immediately got radiation sickness and began to die.
Yeah, I called this one Bean Team. When I was like, no, let's be for real, man. We know this more than likely. This not God. Let's just be for real about the situation. And I was like, man, the damn kangaroos, radioactivity, some type of way. Gonna find out these dudes doing a secret damn nuclear bomb test and don't give a F about the environment or the people who are around.
Unknown number of people died from these nuclear bomb tests. And it would take 11 years before the British government would come in and begin cleaning up the nuclear waste. The Australian government ultimately paid $13.5 million in compensation to Aboriginal tribes that were affected by these tests. As for Neri, he survived, And today, he's actually in his 80s, and he continues to tell his story to younger generations.
MrBallen commercial, y'all. That was a cool picture of seeing Neary at the age of 80 plus years old, man. At least he survived, but he still lost a lot of people in his tribe. And I know he'll give back all those millions of dollars to get his family back. That's so crazy, man. You see how the government, some low down dirty, you know what's being team. Don't trust them. Don't trust all of them, at least I should say. Let's go to the next one.
At 4 p.m. on Saturday, October 26, 2019, a 56-year-old woman named Pamela Krymeyer was hanging out in her son's backyard in Knoxville, Iowa. She was there with her son and his wife, who was expecting a child, along with some other relatives. And they were there that day in the backyard to have a gender reveal party. And Pamela could not have been more excited. So during the week, Pamela worked full-time as an assistant at a U.S. Army base nearby. But to her, that was just a job. That was not like her identity. Where Pamela really put all her energy was her family. I mean, she really identified not as somebody who worked at that Army base, but rather as a mom and a wife and a grandmother. And she was so excited to find out if her new grandchild was going to be a boy or a girl. And so after a little while, Pamela's son finally signaled to the group that it was time to get started. And so Pamela and the other relatives got really excited and they backed up towards the fence on the side of the yard. And Pamela pulled out her phone to film this because she wanted to make sure she saved this moment for future generations. I mean, this was a pivotal moment in her family's history. And so all excited, Pamela's filming, and Pamela's son and his pregnant wife walked towards the middle of the yard where there was this device that was set up that was basically going to reveal whether it was a boy or a girl. Blue for boy and pink for girl. There was going to be some dust kind of shot out into the air. And so Pamela's son turns to the crowd and says, "Okay, you guys ready?" And Pamela's really excited. She gives a thumbs up and she's filming. And then Pamela's son turns away from the crowd and he kind of leans over this device. He does something to it. And then he and his wife backed up along the fence line with the other relatives. And everybody watched and filmed, waiting to see if this device was going to spit out blue or pink. But excuse me, y'all. Boy, this device finna spit out something that you don't want to see it spit out. That's what I feel like being team. This is giving me Lazy Masquerade, Tragedy Tales, and Nick Crowley vibes, y'all, of these gender reveal parties. And did I say Tragedy Tales? Tragedy Tales too, if I didn't. Of these freaking gender reveal parties just going horribly wrong in so many different ways. One of them I can remember was like, They had like this freaking airplane or something that flew over the house. You know what I'm saying? They all in the backyard and they had this airplane that was going to fly over the house, and whatever type of smoke come out the exhaust, either blue or pink, was going to reveal, you know, the gender or whatever. But that went horribly wrong too, Bean Team. And I don't know how this was finna go, but I feel like this freaking device is not about to do what it's supposed to do. Before anybody could see any color, there was this deafening, booming sound, and then for Pamela, everything went black. A split second later, the backyard was absolute chaos as people screamed and called out to call 911. It would turn out the device in the middle of the backyard that was going to be used to reveal whether the baby was a boy or a girl was a homemade device. Basically, it was like the cylinder that Pamela and her son and family had made that basically would fire off either pink or blue powder. Except the tube that the powder sat inside of was metal, and then what they were using to basically shoot the powder out was gunpowder. So they basically packed gunpowder into a metal tube, sealed it off, and then attached a fuse to the gunpowder. And so when Pamela's son went and lit the fuse, as he leaned over and lit the fuse and said, "Okay, we're gonna see what it spits out," he had lit, effectively, a pipe bomb. And then when the fuse ignited the gunpowder, the metal tubing exploded and sent shards of metal up to 400 feet away. And one particular piece of metal shard went right at Pamela and into her head. When first responders showed up in the backyard, they saw a scene that was absolute chaos. Holes in the fence, holes in the house, metal everywhere, and Pamela lying up against the fence on the ground, dead. Amazingly, despite the shrapnel being blasted out all over the neighborhood and in close proximity to other people in the backyard, Pamela was the only fatality. And because it was ultimately ruled an accident, no one faced criminal charges.
I actually remember that story, Bean Team, because I remember that picture, that illustration of the actual device that they created. And it's just so crazy. It's like, what did y'all think was going to happen, man? You got gunpowder in a metal tube, topping it off, and then you putting a freaking lighter to it. Oh my God, dude, that's pretty much like MrBallen said, a makeshift pipe bomb. That's the only good thing I guess I can say with this story, y'all. I'm happy and just thank God that she the only one who did lose her life. Hate she lost her life too. Rest in peace to Pamela. But it could have been a lot more people hit by all that shrapnel and metal flying object. Did you hear MrBallen said that the shit flew over 400 feet away? And it was a lot of people in that backyard, man. So thank God for that. But this was just, and then you also think about, like, this is just one person idea. A lot of people was in on making this device. I don't know how in the hell they thought that was safe. Let's go to the third one. The simulation.
On the morning of October 30th, 2014, a 54-year-old Russian pilot named Sergei Galitsky, along with his translator, walked into the Flight Safety International building in Wichita, Kansas. This building was inside of the Wichita National Airport, and it was basically just a big training facility for pilots. Once inside, Sergei walked up to the front desk and explained to the clerk in Russian that he was here that day to try to get a certification for a particular type of Cessna plane. His translator then repeated what he said in English to the clerk, at which point the clerk nodded and said they would go back and get Sergei's instructor. A few moments later, the clerk returned, now with a 78-year-old man named Jay Ferguson, who was the instructor. Jay introduced himself to Sergei and the translator, they all shook hands, and then Jay led the two deeper into the building. And as soon as they were inside, Sergei and the translator saw all this crazy high-tech training equipment basically everywhere they looked. Eventually, Jay came to a stop in front of this big white circular pod that was up on top of this electronic base. Now, to the untrained eye, this might look like a futuristic amusement park ride, but to Sergei, he knew what this was. This was a flight simulator. So Sergei had been a pilot for over 30 years. He had loads of experience flying. He had flown big commercial aircraft and helicopters. But today, he was learning how to fly a sort of mid-tier plane, this little Cessna plane. And before he'd be allowed, even with all this experience, to actually go out and fly this thing, he had to do a couple of simulated flights inside of the simulator to kind of run through the motions, get some experience before actually going out and doing it. And so Jay reached out and opened up the door to this pod and gestured for Sergei and the translator to go inside. And so they did. Sergei went in, and he saw right away that the inside was an exact replica of the inside of a Cessna, like down to every little detail. It looked exactly the same. Even out the windows, it appeared like they actually were situated on a real airport runway. And so Sergei sat down.
I ain't gonna lie, man, this little pod is kind of freaking cool, Bean Team. You know what I'm saying? It's something that I may want to get inside and simulate with or whatever, but for real, y'all, I'm just sitting back right now wondering, like, what can go wrong in this situation? What is about to happen? I don't know. Let's find out.
Down in the pilot's seat, Jay took a seat next to him, and the translator took a seat behind both of them. Once they were situated, Jay and Sergei went through the mandatory pre-flight safety checks, something you would do on any flight. You just make sure the plane is in good working order, that your communications are good. Same thing they would do for a real flight, they're doing for this simulator. And then, once they were done, Jay pressed a button, which turned on the engine of this flight simulator. And it actually felt like it really turned on a real engine, like the pod began to rumble, like this was a real plane. Then, once Jay gave Sergei the green light, Sergei released the brakes, at which point it very much appeared like the plane began to roll forward. And as it did, Sergei grabbed the yoke, which is like the steering wheel, and he began to turn the plane, this simulated plane, towards the runway. And it was amazing how lifelike this whole thing felt. The pod actually would move and kind of keep up with all the movements that Sergei was initiating in this simulation. It really felt like they were in an actual plane. And then, once Sergei had positioned the plane on the runway, he hit the gas, and the pod throttled back as the plane rocketed down the runway, and before long, they took off and they were up into the sky. Once flying in the sky,
Okay, I'm finna say something crazy. First of all, I want to throw two theories out there. Let me just say the one that's not that crazy first. Is the pod gonna freaking explode or something? Like, I'm trying to figure out what's gonna happen to this pod. But here come my crazy theory, being team. What if Sergey, or I don't think the flight inspector, I'm not gonna say him, but either Sergey or his translator, right? When they in this simulation, some kind of way Sergey end up crashing to the ground or something, and it looks so real to them that one of them end up having a heart attack from this ish and die in a damn simulation pod. I don't know, being team. I know that sound crazy, but guess what? It's a MrBallen Sunday, so we gotta come up with crazy theories about what's going to happen. Let's go.
Sergey kind of circled around the digital airspace for a while, kind of feeling out the controls, and he quickly found the Cessna was a little bit more sensitive than the other aircrafts he had flown before. So it took some time to kind of get his bearings, and then once he was feeling pretty comfortable, and he relayed as much to Jay began relaying directions and feedback to Sergey through the translator, just basically testing Sergey's ability to fly this craft, because at the end of the day, this was a test. Sergey needed to prove he could do this in order to get his certification. After a little while, Sergey felt like he was doing a really good job and he had good control of the craft, and Jay as well felt like this had gone really well and, Sergey had effectively passed his test, and so a decision was made to go ahead and land this plane back on the runway. So Sergey circled around and he angled the plane right alongside the runway, and he came down and he was taking his time and everything was going exactly right, and then right as the wheels of this plane touched the runway, the instant that happened, there was this loud crashing sound, and then everything went black. At the same time this was happening, folks standing outside of the Flight Safety International building, they heard this loud crashing sound, and they looked in the direction, which is toward the Flight Safety building, and they saw there was this massive fire and black cloud of smoke coming up from the backside of the building. And so they called 911. And when first responders arrived on scene, they discovered evidence of a plane crash. It would turn out there was another pilot named Mark Goldstein who was flying that day out of Wichita National Airport. Except Mark was flying an actual plane. He was the only passenger inside of a 6-seat passenger plane. And pretty much as soon as he took off, he lost control and he crashed through the walls of the Flight Safety International building. Specifically, he struck the flight simulator where Jay, Sergey, and his translator were busy trying to land their digital flight. The plane crash, along with subsequent fiery explosion, claimed the lives of Mark, Jay, Sergey, and his translator.
Damn, man. Well, I was wrong about that one, being team. I was completely wrong, but I would have never freaking guessed that. And then just the fact that this real plane so happened to be crashing into the building where they in a simulated plane landing at the same time is just like 1 in a trillion chance of freaking happening. Trillion times a trillion chance of happening, being team. And for a second, I thought MrBallen was gonna be like the pod end up protecting them. You know what I'm saying? And they didn't die, but no, all 3 of them died. Rest in freaking peace. Then they had no idea that was happening at all. You know what I'm saying, man? They had no idea they were spending their last freaking moments on Earth together in that pod. Oh my God, being team. Seriously, man, that was a crazy one. The second one was one that I remember. I think that was from the Lazy Man. I reacted to that probably like a year and a half ago now. With the freaking gender reveal. And I just sit back like, dude, I just don't understand how a group of them didn't, nobody came up and was like, hold on, this is a bad idea. We creating a freaking bomb right now. You know what I'm saying? The gunpowder and oh my God. Rest in peace to Pamela though. And like I said, if I want to try to look at the bright side, at least more people didn't die in that backyard. We can say that. And what was the first one, being team? The kangaroos. Now, I predicted that one. I was like, man, let's be for real. It's not a gift from God, and I can understand why they thought it. You know what I'm saying? But if we keep it real, I'm like, man, these damn kangaroos probably then got some radioactivity or something going on with them. And come to find out, the damn British government doing secret nuclear bomb testing and ain't telling nobody who around but them. Come on, man. That is so effed up. And like I said, all that money that those families, they got millions of dollars being seen, but they'll never bring their family back. And I know if they could give that money back and get their family back, they would do it in a heartbeat. Freaking crazy. And I digress. I'm gonna go and let y'all go now. I appreciate y'all coming on back as always. And before you leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this: love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.
If you're feeling lonely today, come along and throw your cares away. We're really glad that you're our friend, and this is a friendship that'll never